Hello and welcome to another episode of the Consciousness Collective podcast. I am your host, Leb, and today I have yet another special guest with me, Larry King of Unified Origins.
Hi, everyone. My name is Larry King. I am a multidimensional Reiki practitioner and spiritual life coach, and I have a very firm belief that everyone has the ability to heal themselves. And of course, that does come along with the decisions that you make and each one of us make in our lives to take those steps for promoting our own personal growth.
Excellent. And where can people find you?
Well, I'm mostly on TikTok. I also have Facebook and a YouTube channel, Unified Origin on YouTube, Larry King on Facebook. But most of my content and everything is usually worked through TikTok right now.
Yeah, it's been a great platform for that. It's really nice to kind of work through. So multidimensional consciousness. It's funny. I was writing down ideas, subjects that we can get into, and that was the first one. So the fact that you mentioned it in the intro is awesome. What is like? Describe a little bit of like your understanding there of
Okay, so
multidimensional consciousness.
most of the things that I know to be true to me is I've pretty much experienced it. Okay, so most of the things that I know isn't things that I've read out of a book or gathered information from other people. So on the multidimensional consciousness part of it, it's essentially, in my point of view, it's the intermingling of all realities and all experiences together, and throughout the webs and the entanglements throughout everything, you can actually straighten these things out to where they're direct lines of information coming into the physical and mental bodies and energetic bodies, pretty much just to align you with your highest self and your highest good.
Yeah, I like that. The experiential aspect is so important, I think, because when we start talking about multidimensional concepts, um, it's oftentimes hard to explain them or to feel like you're explaining them well in the 3D.
Mm-hmm.
All right. And it's really something that you just kind of, you know, have to start experiencing.
And I totally agree there, and the thing about it is there's a lot of teachings and a lot of things through different modalities. And really I think it's what it's about, like you were saying, it's the experience that the person has, what they're willing to experience within their own energy field, because it's not the idea of energy work. It's not a cookie cutter thing, like everything having to do with quantum mechanics and everything. It's not cookie cutter. And it depends on what an individual's connection is to these things and how they perceive it within their own abilities. And of course, there is like a general foundational sense of abilities that people have. Everyone can run energy. Everyone has the ability to read energy and project energy for that matter. But you can't really depend on every outlet of information to tell you exactly how to do anything, because you got to use that as a foundation so that you can actually expand your own consciousness within it.
Yeah. I like to think of it as like you can use the knowledge and the information from other sources, other people sharing to expand what you're able to accept as possible, really. And that is how that information acts as the key to unlocking what you can then start experiencing, but without actually diving into it and, going through the meditation, the practices, and seeing the senses, how you bring or how you translate it in your own head is the key to actually being able to connect and utilize. Uh, it actually brings up the idea of attunement for me.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so I know that you teach people Reiki. You have various levels of classes that you do. So kind of in that realm, what is your understanding of what an attunement is?
Okay, so the way I see attunements, because I've actually been picking up on this a lot with a lot of people, and of course, in the standards of say Reiki, is it's essentially the definition in my point of view and my translation is essentially opening up the energy channels throughout the body, mostly the arms and the heart. But I extend it even further than that, all the way down to the legs, because that is our whole connection. So it's really just opening up those energy channels so that you can channel energy. I've had several sessions here in the past year where people just automatically they're natural healers in themselves, and whenever they get an energy work session done and it's being called to open up these channels in their hands and in their arms and throughout their heart, it's really essentially opening up that energy so that they can create with that energy in their hands. Okay, because I've worked with people that's had certain types of attunements, which this is somewhat different than an actual Reiki attunement, but it opens up the channels and such so that they can become more creative, or being able to actually put their hands on something, like if it's something that they've just kind of gotten out of, like say if I'm working with someone who's a woodworker and they've always loved doing it. They haven't done it in years. They've closed themselves off to that. That will in turn, at times, an attunement will come through for someone like this, and it just basically sparks that inspiration to start doing this type of stuff again. Because it is a type of energy work. Anything that we're doing with our hands, we're creating things that we enjoy doing and really just feel accomplishment with. That is healing. That's part of healing ourselves as our own person, to be able to have that creative expression to come out. And of course it comes through not only with that, it could be, cooking, writing, anything that the hands do to actually make that or create that spiritual and creative expression.
Yeah, I love that it's I just really like that mentality. It's much more grounding when we talk about the idea of creating, or and healing, even of doing things in what we would call the 3D. Just your ability to work and manipulate the environment around you through your physical abilities is a big part that I think in the spirituality community, like, I think that can get discredited a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
you know?
Yeah, it does. Is because one thing about what I call basic expressions in spirituality, a lot of people stay stuck way up in their upper chakras, and yeah, all this creation and dreaming and visualization and all this is happening out here, but none of it's actually being brought down into the body. And whenever it's able to be brought down into the body, then that's when you can actually start seeing the results in the 3D world.
Definitely. And that speaks on like the importance of grounding. Um,
Yes.
and also we're kind of, when you're getting into the realm of, possibly what would be known as like spiritual psychosis, when somebody is so completely enmeshed in those upper chakras that they lose touch as far as being able to bring those things back down in a digestible, or what we might say as real kind of manner. I don't know, is that kind of getting close to like what is
Yeah.
your
Yeah,
understanding of
it
spiritual
is because
psychosis?
that's one thing I find in spiritual psychosis situations and circumstances is that usually people get so caught up in whether it's healing or taking out attachments or what have you, and everything connected in that realm, just to not get too deep and out there with it. But whenever they're so focused on everything that's happening out here, and this also goes along with ideas, as I said earlier, dreams that you want to accomplish and really see happen in this life. and everything gets so jumbled up and confused that a person actually begins to separate themselves from their actual living experience. This doesn't negate the fact that life is a fantasy, but you have to be able to create that fantasy. It has to come from up here and be brought down into that grounded state so that you can create and experience the fantasy that you are actually consciously projecting into the world. And whenever a person is so far up in their upper ethereal minds, so to speak, it's so jumbled and messy there because there's no organization. And that's usually when people have all of this stuff that they want to do. They'll sit down and start writing or start a project, and that's all they do is just start that project. And it could even be writing the idea down. All right. And then because they're so far stuck up here, now that you've written it down, you've now grounded it down onto something. So if you're not centered and grounded into your own system, then that's all the work that had to happen in that moment because of the fact you've now taken it out of here and put it here on paper. But then we get leveled, but we come back up into this space and we have all this other stuff going on that we can't even begin to think about what's happening right here.
Yeah. Again, just the importance of grounding and simple acts in the 3D to bring the experiences that we are having in the what one might call the higher dimensional states. They don't really do us a whole lot of good if we can't bring them down to the 3D.
Exactly.
And I think you and I have touched on this, or like you've mentioned it either in videos or during lives, to kind of correct the idea of what ascending into the 5D is, and that it's not like we're not going anywhere. We're not just going to go poof and disappear.
Exactly.
Yeah. And so the way that I like to put it is that we are stepping into a 5D consciousness, as in we are gaining awareness of things beyond our 3D. But the point of that and having that experience here is being able to ground those ideas into the 3D to help kind of elevate, well, the rest of the reality.
Yeah, exactly. And first of all, it all begins with you. So it's bringing the energy down, integrating whatever codes or energy or ideas that are coming through for you personally. And energetically, if you're able to accomplish any of it, any part of it, it begins to influence the collective area of consciousness. And that just helps promote and support that energy coming down into other people's lives as well. And that is a big part of it. And a lot of people misconstrued the 5D with actually physically leaving, or not so much physically, but energetically leaving the physical body. Okay. But in my experience and with how I see into the ethers, the only way to actually physically completely leave the human body is to actually pass over and go to the other side and actually leave the body. But even with that, if you haven't accomplished the things that you've needed to accomplish, you live your lessons and move through them, and that's when the idea of reincarnation comes in, which oftentimes is already decided by us at that point to come back and experience more, because our soul's mind and idea of what an experience is different from us as human beings. And our job is to bring that soul essence down into the human body so that we can expand from here and out. And with that being said, people have to understand that with doing that, It's not just bringing your entire soul in that connection to the 5D and to the body. Because if we were to actually have the capability to pull our entire soul, as big as it is, into our body, we would explode. Our human body wouldn't be able to handle it. So what it is, it ends up becoming it's almost like a circulation that moves through, just like any other energetic field. It circulates and moves through. So that connection is constantly feeding the 3D, and the 3D ideas and experiences are feeding the 5D, and it just keeps wrapping back around like this. And of course, not even just the 5D, and it expands out to all other dimensional connections that we have as well. So it's not even just about even reaching the 5D level, because many of us have connections up into the ninth and the 11th dimension. But we choose to, a lot of times, stay in this, I don't really want to say comfort level, but it's a stable, more of a stable level up into the 5D. Okay. And then every once in a while, whenever we need to make that connection, we just reach a little bit upward. And there we are connecting with those parts of us. And the experiences that we have throughout all dimensions, throughout our multi lives that we live, we could be a wide variety of not just human, but at the same time, we could be on a starship somewhere and being a captain or a first officer, or we could be on another planet somewhere, just living up the most peaceful and energetic life. And on the flip end of that, we're also could be in another place to where we're experiencing stuff that we can't even fathom, as far as what we would consider bad experiences. But it's all things that have to come together all at one time to create where we're at as human beings in this body.
I love that, and I resonate with it quite a bit. Like I've said in the past and in other episodes, I actually just on the last one was using the example of past lives, and a different way of understanding that is actually simultaneous incarnations. As in thing, because from that higher dimensional perspective, time isn't linear in the way that we perceive it. And all of those different experiences, all those different incarnations, like you were saying, up to and including the incarnations as different star seeds or as different, just whatever, really, you name it. Those are all essentially lessons that we're able to tap into and kind of integrate into our experience once we learn to kind of connect with those frequencies.
Exactly. Yes, and it's a really beautiful thing too once you've begin to realize it, and even on the idea of past lives or parallel lives, we can actually energetically pick and choose on what energies we want here with us. And because we're allowed to be a human on another planet or in another realm or in another parallel reality that may be also Earth, and we're allowed to have those human experiences along with the upper dimensional experiences, because it's like even stepping into the 4D and 5D, what we consider them the 4D and 5D beings, they even are still sitting in that experience. We experience as human beings, we experience the emotion behind everything. And the upper levels of the dimensions of ourselves, they're experiencing the flow, the logic, the lack thereof of logic behind things. Okay. And so we're actually out here observing ourselves as human beings and learning from these upper states and being able to make that connection within ourselves that then allows us as human beings to learn from those upper levels of ourselves. And even with the idea of setting energetic boundaries, like the concept of dealing with past life situations. There may be a past life or a parallel life that really we carry a lot of trauma from, and we have the capability to go and heal ourselves and separate our energy from those experiences as individuals here on Earth. And doesn't mean that we're not still experiencing and learning from those situations, but it's just say, no, I don't want this in this life anymore. So we can then go and heal those parts or separate those parts. And by separating those parts, basically pulling all the good knowledge from that experience and giving back all the unpleasantries back to that experience and separating those energies out. So that way you still gain the knowledge from the experience without the actual experience of the trauma.
Yeah, perfect. I'm kind of chuckling because if people are listening through episodes, Willow was on the last one. We were having a similar discussion, and I know that you haven't seen that one yet because at the time of this recording, it hasn't been published. But the perspective that you just brought to it, there's some slight differentiations in the wording, but the idea is very much the same as what we were discussing. So I'm curious then, with awakening and evolving, like, do you see it working in that similar way as like connecting with, say, your higher self and embodying that, or embodying maybe your future self, like going same thing, different direction, going ahead as to finding what you want to bring in as opposed to like what you're done with?
Yes, exactly. And with the higher self, I feel like it's a little bit different, because the higher self is basically the extension of our human form. It's basically the bridge from our human experience to the upper experiences. All right. Because we can be connected with our higher self, we could gain knowledge. Part of that is tapping into some of our intuition on some levels. Okay, that's where it's like a voice in your head says, no, you better not do that. And you're either going to listen to it or you're not, you know? So it's that connection of basically unperceived knowledge and that's coming through. So that's the higher self just connecting with all the other realms and dimensions and all the other forms of yourself to basically say, no, you might not want to experience that, or you might want to experience this. And then that's where our forward movement or lack thereof happens here, because that starts stepping into the human brain where it likes to keep us safe and not want to do anything new and stay in that comfort zone.
I was just going to say comfort zone. Exactly. One of the things that always comes to mind when I hear about the comfort zone is that there's no change in the comfort zone and no comfort in the change zone.
That's right. In all aspects.
Right? Very much so. So, okay. My next question, when I'm kind of like, as we're expanding from here, where do guides fit into this picture? As in, like, what is your understanding of getting guidance? Because I'm sure you're familiar, and actually I could ask you what guides you connect with, but people connect with deities, people connect with star seeds, people connect with blah, 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 XYZ, you can name it. What's your understanding of what's going on there?
Okay, so guides. This is a tricky subject with me because I'm usually very straightforward with this. So guides.
Feel free to be straightforward here too.
Okay, and my idea is that of course we're all born with specific guides, and most of us call them guardian angels, and those are the ones that are like you're walking around. Where did my keys go? Oh, right there. Okay. Those are the ones that are there saying, no, turn left instead of right now. Okay. Those are the ones that are immediate information. They have you go a different direction rather than the route that you usually go. And then a lot of times you end up missing something that happened on that regular route that you don't want to experience. And that's the way I feel about our so-called guardian angels, or the guides that are actually born with us, that are assigned to us. And then from there, we have beings such as archangels, ascended masters, of course, all the different types of so-called star seeds that are out there. Pleiadians, Lumerians, everything. It can come from anywhere. I think that the biggest thing that people make a mistake with, because I've worked with so many different beings, including different deities, and I think what a lot of people can't grasp is that the guides that you have that come into your life, they're not here to make decisions for you. Okay, they're here to say, hey, you could go this way, and it might be beneficial. But even within that, like say, even any of the archangels or any of the ascended masters, they're still on their ascension process as well. Until a soul flips all the way back into the all creative power, we are on what would be considered an ascension process. And if is where people get really messed up with is whenever, say, like Archangel Michael comes in and he's saying, hey, no, you got to do this, make this decision, yada, yada, yada. And they just run with it. A person as a human just runs with it. Then all of a sudden their whole life is wrecked. And as what people don't understand is that even Archangel Michael or Saint Germain, they all have their own agenda. Okay, they're on their ascension experience. And yes, how it may help you in some ways, one has to use their own discernment and asking, is this for my complete highest good? Because they may be working through us to achieve their ascension goals, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which is all cool and everything if the two people that are the two beings that are involved are under complete understanding and consent with that. Okay. But I think it's what a lot of people do is they allow these beings or entities essentially come into their own circle. Okay, because I see all of us, for lack of a better word, better expression, it's almost like our own personal magical circle of our creation, which is somewhere within the realm of our energetic field. And whenever we allow these beings inside to stand with us, that's when we start absorbing the things that they are going through and what they have to do. And whenever our energies begin to intermingle and basically it creates an entanglement, now all that confusion sets in because you've actually stepped more towards embodying a being rather than embodying yourself. And the way I see it, I can humbly say, I'm humbly saying this, I consider myself to be equal or possibly even above the archangel status. Okay. And the only reason why I say that is I stand with them. When I'm working with any of these beings on a positive level, I'm standing shoulder to shoulder. And I'm not asking their permission for anything because I don't need their permission because I'm already an archangel and I have my own mission, right? And people don't understand that they're so very powerful. Yes, they need the support from their warrior counterparts or buddies in a sense. Okay. But we should be fighting or moving forward, not so much fighting, but we should be moving forward together with things. Just like many times whenever I'm in sessions, whether it's live or in one-on-one sessions, I get offered energy to help with a person's energy, but I always use my own discernment. There have been times where I said, no, that energy isn't needed here. Appreciate the offer, but no. It's kind of like someone on the street Um, if you drop, say, old school, you drop your books and a handful of papers, and someone on the street is either going to happily help you pick it up just because they want to, or they're going to stop and do it, then they're going to look at you waiting for validation. So as we as individuals and our own energies and our own connection to source, God, or however you want to look at it, we have to stand firm within that because we are essentially that spark of God. We are the angelic forms that were here and always have been here. You know, whether it's the upper dimensional like archangels and other angels, or if it's even things such as like earth beings connected to the earth, the fairy realms, and all of this, all the elemental stuff, because there's all different kinds of us, but it's all, or we all connect differently, should I say. And, that's for one, what makes us unique in our own energies and our own connections. But we are all still part of that spark of energy, so it's that creative force energy. It just depends on how you actually connect with that. But going back onto spirit guides, I personally feel like I've always had a really good connection with God, you know, and I've known for most of my life that even though I might be working with Ishtar or any of the Egyptian gods or goddesses, okay, I've worked with, throughout my life, I've worked with several different deities, and it's really just like you have to understand that you have the answers. You're already connected to all the answers. And as far as guides go, they're there to help you like realize some things. But initially, in your own heart and your own connection to God and creation is where the answer lies. Because as it trickles down, it's like playing the game telephone as a child. You have 15 people, you start with one, by the time it gets to the end, the whole expression is completely different and distorted. And so I kind of like to bypass all of those, connect straight into source energy and gather my knowledge from there. Other than the guys that are actually assigned to me, and those are the answers I get very fast, and it is, what should I do? This, boom, oh, perfect. But it's usually in that very present moment rather than thinking ahead into the future.
That makes sense. There is a lot in there of you are the master of your own reality kind of thing, or of your own experiences. You get to make those decisions, and that what guides offer is essentially perspective. And you can, keep in mind that you have the discernment as to what you want to take and to incorporate into your own field, your own path, and what you just don't necessarily want to.
Yeah, exactly. And not everything's right for you. There can be, you can have 1,000 ideas and have 1,000 messages come in. And yeah, they are all right on a certain level, but they might not be right for your experience, especially whenever you begin to take into the fact that, we're connected in so many different levels and dimensions that it could be, we have so many outcomes that could happen. And of course that steps more into timelines and such like that. But we all have the ability to make our own decisions, to move or to stay still, and we shouldn't be being pushed too hard by anyone. And of course, that doesn't negate the fact that, yeah, you do have strong messages that come through. A lot of times, whenever those messages do come through and they're being so annoying because you're like ignoring it, it's something that you should probably look at. But as far as just saying, hey, Archangel Michael, what should I do? Oh, okay, perfect. I'll go do that. And now you're basically being ruled by an upper level entity or being
Mhm.
to go and do their job.
That's an interesting perspective. I really like that, actually. Uh, Look at that into a way of almost you don't want to step into like a subservience
Yeah,
to
exactly.
these higher level beings. But at the same time, like once again, it comes down to discernment because I do get that you're not saying that they're all bad or anything like that, or that you shouldn't listen to them, but that not everything that you run into is necessarily going to be for you and the journey that you are here to experience or here experiencing.
Hmm. Hmm. Exactly. And of course, that also comes with what your goals are. Because it's like if you're working on a project and yeah, there are changes that happen in life to where it completely uproots you and sends you on a different path, you know. But those are the types of things where if you're stuck in a 9 to 5, so-called 9 to 5, but you're actually working 70 hours a week and you're stuck in this, and then one day you have an awakening, oh my God, this isn't right for me. I should be doing this. This makes me feel a lot happier. That's one thing. But whenever you are moving forward on your path, and then halfway through, you get a chime in saying, nope, rip it to pieces, start over. We're doing it this way this time, and that a lot of times is where people get caught up with their experience because it causes a lot of confusion because it's almost like having, um, it's almost like being a child and you have an idea and your mom's telling you no, and if you were to have just been allowed to express that, your entire life would have been changed forever, because you were allowed to have that space to express it.
I'm just kind of recalling some of my own experiences, even as of recently, and feeling like I was in I don't know, almost a decision paralysis. And it's funny talking about this because, well, the podcast here is part of what came of this whole situation. But feeling like there were multiple different directions that I could go. And I was waiting for guidance, quote unquote, right? Uh, but really wasn't receiving any other than make a decision and go.
Yep. Yeah, it's like it's
Okay.
moving, just moving, doing something, and see what happens. You
Yeah.
know.
Well, and I think it's kind of a common thing with guides, as you say. I am remembering a video of yours from a while ago, maybe up to a year ago, but months ago, where you were basically just smacking the camera, going, "Your guides are not here to make decisions for you." And like that one, I remember seeing that one. I was just like, "Oh yeah, he's right. You're totally on it." Um, but yeah, and again, to kind of go back to almost where we started. So you gave me that message. I still had that struggle. Like I had the knowledge, I hadn't quite applied it, until I went through the experience myself. I actually, at the beginning of the getting together, I wanted to bring that one up because that was such a great message. And it's a shift, and I think it's a necessary shift to get people out of the whole, like, what do the guides want me to do today? And like, don't get me wrong, that is an experience that is okay to do, but note that it is still your decision to follow what the guides want. So there is still that like autonomy in there, and to break people out of that, to understand the decision is still yours to make. That is the discernment. That's part of what we are here as human beings to experience, really.
Yes. And the one thing I will say, as far as, because I've mentioned it earlier, reinforcing the fact that even if you're someone that receives a lot of messages from other beings, which there's nothing wrong with that. It's all about choices, right? But whenever something's coming in strong, or if you feel like you're being forced into something, The only thing that you have to do is ask that guide, if I do this, is this going to be for my highest good? Okay.
Yeah.
And by the laws of all nature, holding that space, they have to tell you the truth on whether it's going to be for your highest good. I've even had conversations with lower level entities with people, and I've asked, is this for my highest good? And they quite literally say, no, it isn't, you
Hmm.
know. But it's just the fact that I actually consciously expressed that communication. They had to tell me the truth. And that's one really good quick way to make that discernment. And even if you don't get a straight yes or a straight no from them, you're going to feel it in your body. Your body's going to tell you the answer. And because, I mean, if something makes you go like this and close down in your body, or if you say even in your hand, if you ask a question, your hand closes up, and then there's something amiss there. There's something wrong, that you have to really look at and make that logical decision. If it's something that's good for you and for your highest good, then your body's going to open up, your shoulders going to open, and in the sense of the hand, your hand's going to open up to either give or receive.
Hmm.
Just connecting with those parts of yourself, and like we've said, using that discernment, questioning the things that are there. I mean, even working a regular job, whether you express it or not, we all have our that inner voice whenever the boss comes and tells us to do something, on whether it's right or it's wrong for us. Yeah, we might go ahead through and do it, but then we feel like crap at the end of the day because we haven't accomplished anything. We've had no growth, you know. So it's really along the lines of just that in itself, is really being able to utilize that discernment and feel into these energies so that you can move in a more of a straight path. And then you don't end up with 15 projects sitting in front of you, and you just can't do anything. You're paralyzed because you don't know what to do first.
Hmm. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. One thing that you touched on in there to me brought up the being aware of your own intentions and setting your intentions. So, like something that I do, because I channel other entities as well and invite guides in during my meditation, but I always specify for my highest good or for my most authentic expression of self. And another one that I like to work in there is working towards the most unified timeline.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and those are great intentions that actually directs the energy into what you're creating, and it's very beneficial to do that. On the latter part of that, but there's some people where they're just like, oh, Lilith, come save me, which a lot of women work with Lilith, and there's nothing wrong with that experience. But with my experience with these things, I've actually seen people's lives just completely crumble when they do stuff like this. There's no formative boundaries there.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, I've always had a connection with Hecate, because I am a very magical person, and I always have been. But I hadn't ever given her any thought, and I guess it was, I don't know, 6 months ago or so, whenever the big Hecate push was all over TikTok. All right, well, about a week before that started crawling all over TikTok, she came to me, and I had a deep conversation with her. I'm like, all right, yeah, you want to work with me. I understand this, but what do I have to give? You know, and I'm like, because I'm not dedicating. I'm going to truly dedicate myself rather than the the typical stereotypical dedication, setting up an altar, doing this, giving offerings blindly, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really just it's setting the boundaries, even with other deities and guides, saying you're only here in my life and this experience. This is my boundary, and if you can't abide by that, I don't want it. And that is partly because we are just as powerful as them, and in a sense, you know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Um, but yeah, it is. It's really just making that connection with the boundaries within boundaries, and being able to say, yeah, I don't mind you being here, but I'm not putting up with your crap.
100%. Yep. Exactly. I'm like, look, this is what I'm looking for. I'm not taking the shit out on the other side of it. Like, I'm not going that way, or outside of those boundaries. I love that. So since you mentioned Lilith, Lilith I know can be, I'm not terribly familiar, but he can be viewed as a darker presence as well, or a darker energy, I suppose. I mean, if I'm not mistaken, I believe some call her Mother of Demons, but
Yes. Well,
uh,
she has a lot of influence. A lot of people have correlated the dark feminine with her.
mhm,
Okay. Um, which she is part of the dark feminine, and she does support the dark feminine. But even within that, if a female or even a male that's connected really deep with their feminine energy, if they're just blindly stepping into the relationship with her, and a lot of people I've noticed over the years that a lot of people with Lilith often use the word embody. Okay, so whenever you embody something, that means you're saying, "Hey, come on into my vessel."
mhm,
Okay, and then that gives that deity or that being partial control over what happens to you, and it doesn't always have to be in the most positive ways. And
yep,
I've seen through Lilith a lot of toxicity. Okay, where versus say Hecate, she's also part of the dark feminine
mhm,
activations. She's more of a very foundational energy. Okay, she's going to support what you want to do. Okay, where Lilith is going to come in and say, no, 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 don't put up with that for any reason. Bypass everything and just leave it all behind. Right. And then I've seen a lot of people really get in some messed up situations whenever it comes to that.
yeah. Well, okay. So the idea, the terminology of light and dark, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think that we have a little bit, mm, we associate it a little too strongly with good and bad,
Yes.
right? You know, whereas the understanding that I would kind of offer there instead of being good and bad, um, is, well, shall I say, the higher dimensional perspective on morality that I've kind of been given is that there is unification and individuation, and that the dark is more focused on individual self empowerment or do things just for you. It's less connected with doing things for the good of all.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Is that is that
It
making sense with
does.
your understanding?
Yeah, it does to an extent. Yes.
And so there is like, I mean, we need both light and dark.
Mm-hmm.
There are things to be learned from what we would consider dark forces, dark entities that can be positive and beneficial. And those largely would be in matters of simply confidence and learning to stand on your own and take no shit from anybody else kind of thing. I'm obviously overgeneralizing here. But at the same time, I feel like that, what we, for lack of a better term, demonize about it is when I'm kind of having a realization that it goes into almost a psychosis on the other direction of, instead of being connected with everything, being completely disconnected from everything and not being able to, again, see your role in the world around you and in the collective, instead just seeing it as I. I want this, I get this, I did, blah, blah, blah. Shift you that way.
Yeah. And also, in correlation with dark and the idea of shadows, so the shadows are what's hidden. They're the things that as individuals we hide from other people. We've buried and hidden them from these aspects of ourselves, from our own self, and
Yeah.
whenever all this stuff lingers in the dark, it's just there floating around, and then all of a sudden one day it pops up, there's an explosion, and then it's buried back. And a lot of times that's when people are like, whoa, what were they going through, and to express that. But the thing is, it's all these things that we buried. And as far as dark forces go, it's a lot the same way. It's all stuff that we as human beings within our souls, we don't want to acknowledge. And even whenever it is right at the forefront, we tend to ignore these things just because that's how society has programmed us. And of course that goes into much deeper conspiracy type theories. But yeah, it's all around us, and we have that within ourselves, and it's essentially very related to the shadows of the collective, the shadows of ourselves. And I'd like to touch on something else, and my expression, a lot of people use the term love and light, and I feel it's kind of gotten blown out of proportion. It's like, oh, love and light to you, and that's all cool, but the way I perceive it, love and light is basically darkness and knowledge. All right. It's giving love to your shadows so that you can bring it up to the light, which is wisdom.
I mean, I know I'm going to go through this recording a few times, but I'm writing that one down. Love and light is darkness and knowledge, because I absolutely love that, quite honestly. And it's something, I mean, I was going to kind of raise my hand of like, oh yeah, I sign my videos off that way fairly often, wishing people love and light.
And that's great, but there are some people which I feel like with your energy and everything, you're more connected to that idea of it. Okay. But a lot of people are just think it's like, I'm going to give you love and I'm sending light to you, and that's not really what it is, Whenever you express love and light, it should be basically, I wish you well on your path. May your darkest corners be brought into the light,
May you flow through your struggles with grace and ease.
That's right.
I did have somebody, I can't actually remember if they called me out on it directly or like I came across it as, just after I had made a video and finished it, love and light. And then I came across a video that was like, I am so sick of this love and light bullshit. You think it's everything so happy dappy and blah, 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 blah. And I was like, whoa. Hold on there a second. Like, I wish people love and light because I have found that in myself through going through my own layers of personal hell and darkness. Like, I understand what those experiences and what those sufferings, those struggles have offered me. Like as I like to say, I had to live in the dark long enough to find that I am the light, that it is within, right? And I just, went off on this little, a little rant in their comment section of like, no, 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 you're not quite getting, maybe where it really comes from. And what I find funny is that person is now a member of my community that regularly is around and in the Discord and all that. So it's just, yeah, it's the idea of rose-colored glasses just came up of
Mm-hmm.
just people walking around, and I think that a lot of people have that idea of spirituality being just that of like, oh, everything's just so pretty and beautiful and blah 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 blah. And to an extent, like, yes, there is a part of spirituality to me that is about appreciating the just what everything in your experience has to offer you. And that can be kind of, viewed as light and fluffy and rainbows and butterflies and crap like that. But at the same time, it is found through the experience of the darkness. And not only that, but seeing what that all of that light, fluffy frou-frou that applies to the dark too, because it has things to offer you. That is how you grow and expand, is by having that essentially something to push against or something to, get lost in, so that you need to find yourself and understand where you want to go.
Mm-hmm. And that oftentimes is very much in the darkness. And and I would like to express, with the idea of the part of spirituality that is all rainbows and unicorns. Okay, I think at some point probably all of us have been through a stage of that. All right, or at least even if it isn't so much all up in the woo woo part of it. Okay, but there is a time to where that you have to learn that yeah, everything is beautiful, everything can be happy. All right, but whenever a person begins to cut people abruptly out of their lives without understanding, okay, that's whenever you're beginning to step into the bypassing. Okay, because even if you are a person that lives up in that butterflies and rainbow stuff, which it should be an ebb and flow. The experience should be an ebb and flow. Uh, Anything that triggers them, they're like, no, I don't want it in my life. Okay. But then is what happens is that trigger keeps showing up. And then now all of a sudden they're standing here and they're all alone because they got triggered by someone else's trigger.
Mm-hmm.
And part of this journey and this spiritual journey is facing those triggers. It's able, like personally, I separated myself from my family for 5 years. Okay, I had a lot of healing to do around my family. I went no contact, and I felt parts of me felt bad about it, because I was in that program of I'm the one that needs to do all these things, but I wasn't taking care of myself completely. And I had to make that separation so that I could learn what my boundaries were within this. But as soon as I started getting to the point where I was realizing who I was as an individual without these influences, I re-invited my family back into my life. All right, because there's a love there, and yeah, they still got their shit. I still have mine. And but the thing is I can not be triggered 100% of the time whenever I'm around them now, because I've set those energetic boundaries for myself. And it's not because I'm ignoring it. It's because of the fact now I understand why they're triggered and I understand why I'm triggered. And so understanding things is a big part of spiritual growth. And then you can decide, all right, I'll love them from a distance. Okay. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you've cut off all communication. Because if you completely take yourself out of every triggering situation, now you're just bypassing. And that kind of goes into something that I've expressed to people before about realities. We all live in our own reality. All right. And you can be the happiest, most highest vibrational person there is in the whole universe. But that still doesn't like deny the fact that you could be standing at a gas pump on the side of a highway and basically have a car all of a sudden fly off this highway or the road and run straight into the gas pumps. Okay. So just because you're in that really, really high vibrational state, and I guess the point here being at some point something's going to crack. And then that's whenever you have to really reevaluate your idea of love and light, your idea of unicorns and rainbows, and what you've been bypassing. A prime example would be someone who's lived a godly life. Okay. And yeah, they may have done a lot of good in some ways, but most of the time it seems like that's out of repenting. And so they're basically doing the same thing. They're bypassing by living up in this really high positive frequency and never dipping down into the lower frequency. And then that's whenever all the judgments and the persecutions come in. And this goes through religion. I've seen it with spiritualists and everything. And you really have to be grounded in what's going on in the world around you. Yes, you have your own reality. You have your own ability to decide how you're going to look at that reality. But anything can happen at any time that can throw you off base. And you have to be able to handle those circumstances. That's where the spiritual growth comes in. That's being able to look at it and observance and with understanding so that you know how it's affecting you and you know how it's affecting the person that's also involved or the people. And then that allows you to connect with your empathy on a different level as well. Because
Yeah.
instead of trying to jump in and try and fix something or try and deflect something, you can now bring that understanding and say, okay, I understand this. This has happened. Where do we go now? And then you basically learn from that experience.
Yeah. Um, you may have seen me writing something down here, but you managed to just touch on it so well with where you went with that of how those like that spiritual bypassing and when you try to avoid your triggers, what you're really avoiding is growth.
Mm-hmm.
You're
Mm-hmm.
avoiding an opportunity to see, well, why that trigger is still there, essentially. Um, but one thing that you brought up though with living a godly or more pious life, and then that uh, essentially being a source or turning into judgments and like judgments of others. I just, I really, I like that. It just feels profound of how judgments are essentially a byproduct of bypassing or of not doing the work yourself. And that just really kind of helps to understand of how like the judgments that other people put on us are projections of their own. And in many cases, it is projections of the things that they are refusing to work on in themselves or refusing to even acknowledge, quite honestly. They're simply denying that that can't be, or that that can be a part of their own field. Whereas when you've gone through and worked those triggers, worked through those triggers, done your shadow work and understood that, nope, you're not always like that high frequency, high vibration. Like you have to get there by going through things. That is where real compassion comes from, and where like being able to understand and not judge people, because you know that you're just, well, one decision away from being where somebody else is, or to kind of to that extent. Does that
Yeah.
making sense?
Yeah, exactly. Well, it's all a reflection. It goes along with, judgment. Anything that you judge is a reflection into yourself. And that kind of brings, the idea of even driving in traffic. And I don't know how you are with driving, but I have my times I'm like, what the fuck is that guy doing? You know? But the thing is, I just did that same thing yesterday.
Right.
you
Yep,
know?
exactly. I've been that guy. Man, that guy pissed me off, so I'm going to do that to somebody else.
Yeah.
Like, oh, damn it. Perpetuated that cycle.
That's right. That's right. And so it goes really deep whenever it comes to these things, and it takes real strength and personal power to really be able to recognize these things and say, okay, well, why am I being judgmental? And it's like, I mean, even as parents, all parents go through it with their kids. There's times where I'm like, what did you do that for? You shouldn't have done that. And it's like, okay, wait a minute. Like, damn, I did that whenever I was a kid too. It's like, and I got in trouble for it. So that's probably
Right.
why he's getting in trouble now. Okay, I'm sorry. I understand.
So I don't have kids myself, but I know that I mean, so many people say that kids will trigger the deepest parts of you that you didn't even know were there at times. And that is like, yep, it can be frustrating as hell, but it's the blessing of having them,
Well, yeah,
because it gives
and
you the
and
opportunity.
their children are our greatest healers.
Mhm.
They're our greatest reflections, and people with children can definitely relate to this. It's like the things I got in trouble for and got yelled at and got spanked over whenever I was a kid. It's like whenever I see my kids doing things, I really have to catch myself because I'm angry because I got in trouble for doing it. Oh, so now I'm angry because now my kid's doing it. And it's like, no, you're not allowed to do that. And it's like, okay, then calm down. This is the experience. This is what kids do. And you have to basically come at it in a different way where you're creating a space for them to learn how to make decisions and different decisions. And within that also on as the parent, that's basically supporting yourself making different decisions, because now you realize how much that messed you up, and you don't want to do the same thing unless your child have the same experience,
Yeah, that
because
makes a
these
lot of
things
sense.
take 30 years to get through.
Yeah, a lot of it does. I've I've revisited a lot of my childhood things, and just it's amazing when you can approach it with that little bit of awareness. And as you say, children give you so much of a better direct reflection. But when you see something and go, "Oh, that's a really old. Oh, that's been affecting a lot of my life," like, oh crap, those moments can kind of be difficult to deal with. I mean, it can be hard not to like get down on yourself for it. Of like, oh, why didn't I realize this earlier? That kind of stuff. But
Mhm. Yeah.
I don't know. As I like to say, though, those self judgments are just make the healing take longer.
Yeah, they do, especially when you don't want to confront them. And then realize that even the judgments that you have about yourself aren't even a lot of times your own judgments. They're just judgments that's been projected upon you. And that's what a lot of us go through with our healing processes and all the different levels that have to happen through that is we have been judged,
Mhm.
and we have to, it's been programmed for us to judge ourselves with that judgment, and that brings me to the idea of, God doesn't judge. When you die, you don't get judgment. Human beings judge all the time. That is God's judgment, you know. And because of the fact we are all the expression of the creator. So throughout our entire human experience, we're judging, and we're judging others, and we're judging ourselves. So this is where the judgment happens. And then by the end of our lives, and we come to terms with that judgment, on whether you have regret or happiness, or you feel comfortable with being able to leave this life, and not have any bad feelings about it,
Yeah, and that's, I mean, so much of where it is. It's not external judgment that you should be afraid of. It's your own.
Mhm. That's right. And then, of course, that's where some of the most authentic parts of ourselves sit, is within those judgments, hidden behind it, because we're too afraid to express ourselves in those ways.
I love that.
Good stuff.
Right? Like, oh, that one hit nice and deep. I like that. That's just as kind of an aside, a check in. How we doing?
uh, how are we doing? How am I
Yeah,
doing?
yeah. You, me. How we doing here?
I think this has been a great conversation, and then there needs to be more conversations like this. And I know that there's a lot of people that align with these ideas that we've talked about. And finally, it seems like that we're all coming out of the woodworks, and of course that goes through the different layers of this spiritual awakening journey, because many of us have been here as observers for years and watching the spiritual communities, um, judging what's been going on, and being like, nah, that isn't right. What are these crazy people talking about?
Yeah, like hold on, that doesn't fit. You know?
And but it's all part of that process too. It's the different levels of spirituality that people go through, and of course, spirituality is, in my personal opinion, is essentially, it's your life. Everything we do in our human form is spirituality.
Mhm.
Even if you're so called asleep, that's part of your spiritual journey. You're going in, and you're doing what the work you think you have to do in that moment. And that even goes along with whatever connection to God, our creation, that has helped you. That's great. Even if you say, like, ex-Christians or ex-Catholics that have stepped out of those religions or any other religion, and they've come to a lot of realizations around spirituality. Even that connection, that was part of their process to become closer to God and creation, essentially. And that's what was able to allow them to awaken to these ideas whenever they actually have what's considered an awakening. And that's a lot of it too. And with awakening, that's exactly what it is. You're awakening. You've never awakened. Okay, you can awaken to the fact that you've done something wrong and something needs to change. But as soon as the awakening process happens, it's a steady school of knowledge that comes through, and every little thing can shift and change. And especially if you're able to shift your perspective and easily, and or at least be open to understanding different perspectives, And
Yeah.
this is where a lot of the activations come from, because you may not resonate with a person on all levels, but they could say one expression that just totally blows your mind. And you're like, oh my God, I look at even my experience in a whole different light. And it doesn't mean you have to agree with everything else that they said, but it's part of your messaging system. It's part of the way you receive that knowledge and activate.
Yeah. To me, like if people were to ask me, what I think spirituality is, the answer that I generally give is spirituality at its core is the exploration of self,
Mm-hmm.
is the understanding of self and even the expression of self. And of course, that ties into that connection to the divine within, because that is part of yourself. That is that divine consciousness, that divine energy being expressed as an individual form. And just the amount of people, I guess, as we could say, waking up has been absolutely wonderful to see. And I, I love that you brought it up as sitting back and watching and like, yep, there's still some judgment going on there. Like, oh, you're on that part of your journey. Okay, like, I get where you're going. This is going to be
That's
fun to
right.
watch. It's, but there's like as you continue on, you see more and more that it's just like, oh, that's just it. It's that part of their journey, you know.
Yeah, and also, I'd like to also add to the idea of judgment too. There is a very, very fine line of the idea of judgment and the idea of discernment. Okay.
Mhm.
So you can observe someone doing something that is like, nah, we'll just wait until they get through this one, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you're actually judging in that respect all the time. It's just having the discernment to know, like, ha, I've already been through that, buddy.
Right. That's a good distinction to make. Yeah, judgment is generally like if you think that makes you better than that person, then there's judgment in there. But if there's, I don't know, if you just kind of have that understanding, like, oh, you're gonna have fun. Good luck.
Yeah, exactly. I'm here when you need me.
Oh, I've basically said that to a number of people, like in my comments section of like, well, when you get over this part, let me know.
That's about it.
Okay, whatever. We'll see you later. Man, I think this also kind of like we're touching into another big part of is just what is going on in the collective today and how people are feeling split. And I don't know about you, but I'm feeling called to bring things out a little bit more, to start having these discussions and having them openly in places where other people can see them, such as podcast, right? But in hopes that I can assist in the shift in, making more perspectives available for people to have. But at the same time, there's this part that like, there's some people I just kind of want to shake awake. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like,
I know.
oh boy, do you?
I run into those people too. I'm like, man, shut up.
Yep, exactly. And I think that's one of the biggest tests of like, I don't want to listen to you anymore. But like, I understand that you are having your experience. This is valid, but go away.
Yeah, I know.
I'm still trying to find that balance, really.
But you see, that's where you're bringing in your own understanding with things as well, So it's like, nah, okay, out of here.
Yep. Yep. Very true. That is that discernment of,
I'll
what do you
check
want to
in
work
a
with?
month, see where you're at.
Oh, man. Yep. It's it's an interesting thing. I guess kind of what I'm getting at is like there's the at what point as whatever term we want to use, practitioners, healer, light worker, wherever you want to, whatever designation, um, where do you change from passive to active?
Hmm. Yeah, exactly. And I think I feel like that's where a lot of us are, and I think it's really stepping over that threshold of judgments and criticisms, because we strive to be our most highly authentic selves, all right?
Mhm.
But even with that, there's the mundane ideas of things, because human beings can be quite petty over many, many different things. And if something's misunderstood and the conversation turns out to basically be one-sided in an individual's mind, that's when all the conflict and the separation begins to happen. And I think the one thing as a collective that we all have to be mindful of is that everything is projected onto us to separate us. And even the most minuscule ideas are here to separate us. And people run off of these things without the knowledge that they need to actually be expressing their opinion. It's not a complete logical opinion. It's just someone hears something about something, they roll with it, create a huge uproar. Now it causes more separation, and whether that's stepping into the idea of politics, if it's stepping into the things that we hear on the news that go against, because we never get the complete truth.
Right.
Okay. It's almost like I'm gonna refer back to working for a company. It's like you go into a company and you're working for them. You're only there doing your job. You're only there and you know what you need to know to get through your day, and that's all that your company and your bosses are gonna let you know about. All
Mhm.
right. And the whole time you're like, man, that boss, he was such an asshole today, yada 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 yada. But as an employee that works under them, we have no idea what's going on in the upper realms of that company. So one person comes, the boss comes in and says, everything's changing today. This is the way we're doing things now. Now everyone's pissed off, and they all have different gripes and stories that they create around it and grievances, but they don't know all the facts of why this change is occurring, you know? And even with policies and stuff, it's like, oh yeah, you guys aren't allowed to have drinks at your desk anymore.
Mhm.
Okay. And it's like, well, why? Blah, 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 blah. You tell me I got to, blah, blah, and it just gets in a griping battle, you know? And no one knows. It's because of the fact throughout the whole company, they've had 5 computers crash because they got spilled over onto the keyboards, you know?
Yes.
And then they think that it's just some story that they've made up, and there's no real truth to it other than what that person is perceiving and creating in their mind. And so it's only backed by the perception of their own ideas rather than the facts that are there. And and as far as politics goes, it doesn't matter who's in office. It doesn't matter who is perceived to be in control. The fact is all the powers that be work together, and they all have all the stuff planned out for agendas that we know nothing about.
Mhm.
And just because one politician is against another politician does not mean that they're not working together, you
Right.
know? And that's one thing as a collective that we have to be able to come together and recognize these things. Yes, our politics does affect our lives on a whole at times, right? But it's what we do as groups of people and as individuals to come together within these times and to create our own realities, you know?
Yes.
And just because all the fuss and the muss about politics is out throughout the whole world, not even just the United States, you know, I mean, there's stuff that's happened in other countries that is just diabolical. Should have never happened. All right, but of course, that's the story we're being told at the same time. So
Mhm.
it's like, what is actually true? And what do you want to absorb out of that information? Do you want to meet it with understanding and get all the facts, or do you want it to blow up just because you were told no without knowing the reason, which is legitimate too,
True.
but I mean, you get what I'm saying? It's like, I think that people put way too much focus on the things that are outside of themselves and what's going on in their own lives. And that's what affects us the most.
Yeah, I would agree. And there's an aspect there like that we have, like, yes, we've shifted more directly to politics, but so much of it has to do with the things that we were talking about earlier on in the discussion. I mean, from the whole like light versus dark kind of thing, it's like they both still have their strengths, and there is so much where we need to start using our discernment as to what we want to integrate, as opposed to just taking whatever source feeds you, right?
Mm.
And at the same time, like the biggest thing is that we are so viewing it as two completely opposing sides, and that the biggest issue, the powers that be, shall we call them that? I think that gives them too much credit,
The
but
powers that were, but it's more the powers that were these days.
yeah, it is. Um, well, their biggest mechanism of control is keeping us divided, is keeping people saying, "Oh, well, if this person doesn't believe this thing and you believe this thing, then that means they're against you and you're against them, and they can't survive if you can't survive, or if you survive, blah 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 blah." Where it's all just, I mean, it's all different frequencies of the rainbow. Really, it's all part of the experience. It's all, you know, different points on the same scale. There's no reason that we have to be so exclusive of one another. We can understand that somebody may have a different perspective than us, and that doesn't mean that ours is invalid, doesn't mean that theirs is invalid. And
Exactly.
the more that we can just start trusting our own discernment and allowing ourselves to see other perspectives, knowing that that doesn't threaten our own.
That's right. It's really just about sinking in and gripping down and addressing the fact that we're separated. And it's not just like, as far as political parties and all that, it's not even just two political parties. They separate us over everything. They separate us from race, they separate us through politics, they separate us for foods. I mean, you got meat eaters and carnivores and vegans arguing back and forth, and it's like, just cool. You want to be a vegan? Be a vegan. You want to be a carnivore? Cool. Yeah, there may be some ethical things in between there, but you don't have to do those unethical things, if you don't want
Right.
to. If you consider it unethical, don't do it, but don't judge me.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. You can just sit back and go, "Oh, that's where you are." Okay. um, um, Larry, this has been a wonderful conversation. I love all the directions that we have taken, um, and really glad just that we got to touch on all the different things. I just want to say I appreciate it. I appreciate you taking the time to be here. And it's been a pleasure, man.
Well, I have so much gratitude for you inviting me, and it's been a wonderful conversation. And I think a lot of people need to have a lot more of these types of conversations. And I would love to see it spread and take hold, not just through, your podcast here, but just people in general. And I think that's actually coming, and it's coming at a very fast rate, which is really beautiful.
Yep. The more that we can get going and just get talking on depth,
That's
really,
right.
the better. I
That's
love it.
right. Thank you,
Well,
Lev. I appreciate
again,
you, brother.
thank you as well.
Much
All
love.
right. Much love and light to you too, brother.
Yeah.